Good, good. Right. Good. Just a striping change. And a signal change. Okay. Okay. Good. Right. No. Right. Right, that's what we call like a 1/4 CFI. Yeah, those little projects do make a difference. So I'll pass that on. It was a project, so it was for our capital program. It works great. Okay, good. Right.
Yeah, so we'll see like a welcome test. That's why it was.
Okay. Sure. Okay, I'll pass that on. I'll have to drive it too. In the afternoon. All right. Sure. Okay.
I'm not, I think it's right.
Okay.
It's like,
Then it worked.
that kind of money is nothing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's amazing.
The site just fits you around it. Sure. Good. I'll pass it on. Good news is great. Good news is great. All right.
Yeah. RTA was almost 66 and the other one was 67.
Both of them were like 66, 67. Yeah, $5 per month at Fort Mill. What that does is it brings some other budget money.
Kelly County shows that they're going to be more money on the table to hire people. So we've got all
That has to do with our CDOT maintenance versus so the city and county of Denver pays $1 million an hour for maintenance. We pay $19 an hour.
we got two city councilmen, Victor, Flat, and votes.
Oh my God.
Exact number of votes. So we're waiting on some overseas mayor candidates.
I remember seeing something like that a couple years ago where the same thing, 5-0, even after
Different races.
2 different races.
Yes.
Oh, we had 4 people vote. I remember seeing that, and they sat down there in pure Colorado fashion, cut the deck.
Oh my.
That's how.
What? High card becomes a council.
How are you doing, Karen?
Good.
Sneaking over to tell Andy congratulations. I'm so excited to see everything that happened for the city last night. So congratulations.
Well, I wasn't real happy about that.
But I. Who's campaigning against it? It's taxes.
I know, that's true. However,
PPACG and
Yes.
the 11 results were really good. And
well, I was talking about the yeah.
mine was who they selected for the representatives. Sean Gillis and Julia are both outstanding, so I was really excited to see them.
Yes, I do. Morning.
Morning.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning and success again.
Good.
So,
Yeah. She's going to call. She's dialing.
Hi, Andy.
Hey, Yolanda. How
How's
you
it
doing?
going?
Pretty good. Come here. Hey, Pooch.
He's like,
Did you see him? He's like, what about me?
What about me? Hey, Joe. Long time no see.
Did you go everything at once?
Yeah, I went to Santa Canyon.
Did you? I went to the.
It was far.
I know. I was actually, but I worked on Julia's campaign, and she was like, you have to come, you have to come.
Where was it exactly? Was it out on Garden of the Gods or something?
It's a soccer place, or you know, yeah, off of Garden of the Gods.
How did you get there? Liz just took us Uber or something?
No, one of my friends said, I want to spend the watch party kind of like you.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, my husband and I just went down to Santa Canyon and hung out there for like an hour and a half. Our daughter, who's in college in Tucson, went home last night. Our flight didn't finish at 10. And then we drove out to the airport and picked her up. So I'm trying to figure out how to make my day today and tomorrow like nothing so that I can go spend time with her because I just have to tomorrow morning because we have Sheree was at the party last night. She said the changes are actually really minimal, just adding to these, moving some money to parks, and so it should be
Transit.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet. I said, when am I going to get to see this? So hopefully we'll get it today.
They already had it ready, right?
Yeah, they are. Just waiting in the wings. So the mayor was very happy.
I was really scared.
I was really scared. It's huge. So my husband said last night, and I think this is interesting, he said, the people that the mayor and Jessica wanted to get elected when we were and they didn't want us. They would have supported Stonewall. They would have been really great supporters. Just the pieces that matter. What they don't realize is that we and Richard and one of the reason they use is that they needed those votes last night to win. They supported those measures which really brought those votes in. They don't realize that diversity really helps. We're all in this together. People. And they trust us. Mark Walton. See, they always sit in my place.
How much by me? Why don't you want to sit by me? What's wrong with me? Siri. Congratulations to you, Councilwoman.
For a 2-week cycle
We were bringing a chair.
You want a chair?
All right.
I've learned when to not say.
Good morning, all. Is this thing working? Yeah. Good morning, all. We'll come.
Good morning. Good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning. Welcome to the meeting here for November. We'll go ahead and go around the room for introductions really quick. But we clearly have a quorum. Andy Pico, Colorado Springs.
Norm State, Teller County, Vice Chair.
Jill Gabler, Colorado Springs.
Tyler Stevens, Green Mountain Falls.
Yolanda Avila, Colorado Springs.
Hal Allgaier, Fort Carson.
Nate Harris, Schriever Air Force Base.
Dave Kincaid, Air Force Academy.
John Doucette, Peterson Air Force Base.
Terry Storm, Military Affairs Council of the Chamber.
Dick Elsner, Park County.
Rick Sonnenberg, Acting Executive Director, PPACG.
Peggy Littleton, El Paso County Commissioner.
Mark Waller, El Paso County Commissioner.
And do we have someone on the phone?
Go ahead again on the phone.
That should be fun.
Nicole?
Can you hear me okay?
There we go.
There we go.
We got you now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's Mayor Nicole, right? Okay.
Yes.
Nicola.
Mayor Nicoletta.
Okay. We have the agenda. The agenda did change, so I'm assuming everybody got the update. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none.
Move approval?
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Public comments for topics not on the agenda? And seeing none. We have on item 4 is a consent. Any items to change, withdraw the consent? Seeing none?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Smoking through here this morning. 5A, establish the nominating committee for PPACG officers for 2018. Rick?
The board bylaws proclaim that those board members who are not seeking nomination for an officer position are eligible for the chair to appoint with the board consent a nominating committee. So you have the memo in front of you that shows the list of board members who are seeking an officer position, in some cases a specific officer position, other cases any. And in the memo, whenever a board member said any, I slotted them in every position. So by process of elimination, the board chair should select those who are not seeking an officer position to be on the nominating committee.
Seeking.
I would love to be on that committee.
What's that?
I said I would love to be on that committee.
Okay.
Very good.
I spoke with Chairman Smith. I'm not sure why he's not here this morning, but he did indicate he wanted to be on that also.
Okay. But he's on PPACG, so, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's 2. It'd be nice to have a third. Any other volunteers? Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, we got 3. So looking for the board concurrence. Entertain a motion at this time.
I can't hear. What was that motion, please?
Just move to approve the 3 that applied for this.
Okay, and so I didn't hear who they were.
Go ahead and.
Dick Elsner, Park County Commissioner.
And Trustee Smith and Mayor Nicolota, yourself.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys.
All right, we need to speak up.
Okay. Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right. Item 5B, 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan Infill Targets. What happened to you?
I'll start with that. Yeah, so the foot, I was at mile 45 of a 50-mile race, and my foot decided to break. So here I am. That's a short version. Anyway, so Jennifer Valentine, I'm a transportation planner with PPACG. Okay, so there's obviously quite a bit of history with this particular item, and that's chronicled in the background section of your memo. So I did want to focus my remarks today just on what's happened over the past month or so. So we brought this item to the board last month and had a discussion, and while there wasn't really a consensus about the direction we should head, we did feel like we got some good guidance for staff to move forward with work products and next steps. So in particular, we heard that there was really a desire to create a regional boundary as opposed to another approach we discussed of having each entity define its own infill areas, largely due to the nature of PPACG as a regional planning entity. The other main piece was to try to incorporate both population and employment in this infill item, if possible. So that's exactly what staff did. We had a number of internal meetings where we developed what we are calling, it's not a great name, but the 2015 population and employment boundary. So that's what I'll be referring to, what is also referred to as the staff recommendation or the CAC recommendation. So we took that boundary along with the other two boundaries that have been previously discussed, which are the 2010 urbanized area. So that's based on the 2010 census, and it reflects 1,000 people per square mile. And so I do real quickly just want to show you what 1,000 people per square mile looks like. So that translates to 0.6 of a dwelling unit per acre. So you're talking about a house roughly on a 2-acre lot. And that looks something like this. So we're not really talking about something especially urban, even though it is referred to by the census as the urbanized area. Okay, so the other boundary that we've been talking about is the urbanizing area, and that's what was developed as part of the 2040 Long-Range Transportation Plan Small Area Forecast. So it's just a forecast of what component of the region will have that 1,000 people per square mile by the year 2040. Okay, so we took those three boundaries to the TAC and the CAC. So the TAC all along has been pretty divided on their opinions about this item, and so at the last meeting there was more discussion, but they weren't really able to budge from their initial recommendation, which was to use that 2040 urbanizing area. So then we took the item to the CAC, also had a very lengthy discussion, and their discussion really focused on which of these boundaries is going to best achieve the already approved objective, which focuses on encouraging infill by focusing on existing transportation infrastructure. So we ended up having two different motions. The first was to use the 2010 census urbanized area, and that did not pass. The second motion was to use the staff recommendation, or the 2015 population and employment, and that did end up passing by a pretty good margin. The other things, other than it just fulfilling the objective, that the CAC really appreciated about this particular boundary was that it did incorporate population and employment like the board recommended last month, and it's also the most currently available data that we have. So that's from the 2015 American Community Survey and 2015 InfoUSA employment data. Okay, so I think those are the main points. At this time, I do quickly want to pull up the Google Earth, sort of the KMZ files that I mentioned in the memo. And so for Councilwoman Avila, for your benefit, this is, if someone described to you the maps that were in your attachments, that's basically what I'm showing right now. So there's nothing new here. It's just kind of a different way to show it. But please let me know as I go along if you want me to describe something a little bit better.
I would like you to be a little more descriptive, because now I didn't have anybody explain the map to me.
Okay, I will do the best I can with that. So here we have a map of our region. So we have a light yellow outline that is just our MPO boundary, so that's everything for transportation purposes. On top of that, the first thing you see, this is the 2040 urbanizing area. This is what the TAC has recommended. This is the largest.
When you say this, what does this refer to?
So it's a boundary. So it's smaller in extent than the whole MPO area.
I get that, but you're not saying where it is.
No, it's not in Cripple Creek. It's kind of a subset of the MPO boundary. It's centered on Colorado Springs and extends up to Monument and extends up to Woodland Park. The eastern extent is kind of Cimarron Hills.
That's what I need to hear.
Okay, perfect. And the southern extent is, somebody help me out. Where are we?
128 Fountain.
Perfect. Exit 128 Fountain. You all have lived here longer than I have. Okay, so the next boundary I want to show is the 2010 urbanized area. So again, this is based on the census. There's not a huge difference between this and what I just described. The main difference is as you head up the I-25 corridor towards Monument, there are still sections that are included, but it's a little bit more sparse, so there's kind of some holes. And then the biggest difference is on the eastern extent. It's more towards, what is that, about Mark Scheffel, as opposed to extending out to Cimarron Hills.
Let's see it, if I can, it adds
Yes, please.
Banning Lewis Ranch vacant land.
It excludes Security, Whitefield, and is that Stetson Hills area?
I think so. Yes.
No, Stetson Hills is pink.
Okay, what's the green area above the Stetson Hills area?
Oh, that goes out to the northeast of Powers.
And there is some portions of southeast Colorado Springs excluded from the King map, correct?
Correct. I'm not sure what those areas are, though.
That's correct. The airport is not in this boundary. And we did talk about that a little bit, I think, at the TAC meeting, and I'm not sure if it was Tim Roberts or Brian Batuli mentioned that that's not targeted for Colorado Springs infill anyway, so they were kind of okay with that.
Between basically Powers and Mark Scheffel.
Yeah, why don't you?
Mark Waller, Yolanda. It excludes all of the areas effectively between Mark Scheffel and Powers. That's complete total urban density that falls within the city limits of Colorado Springs. So I'm not really sure why that is, but it does. What?
I think that's Powers.
I could zoom in.
Yeah,
No,
if that's Cimarron Hills, if Cimarron Hills is accurately being represented, that would be Peterson there, Peterson Avenue, or
Oh, that's Mark Scheffel. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
this is Mark Scheffel.
Okay, so it excludes, but it does include Stetson Hills, or not
Cimarron Hills.
Cimarron Hills, yeah,
So,
which is county area.
so for a large part of
No, so
this,
it does include some of it.
for a large part of this boundary, the eastern extent is Mark Scheffel. Okay, so then the third boundary that we've been talking about and considering is this 2015 population and employment boundary, and that's what is recommended by PPACG staff as well as the CAC. Again, it's even more difficult to see differences around the outline. The main difference between these two boundaries is that it's more current data and we're incorporating employment. So we did it a little bit differently. We still wanted to use that 1,000 number, but it's 1,000 population and or employment, because a large driver for this was getting some of these employment centers like Schriever. So now that shows up. And I know that was really important consideration for a lot of people because it's clearly an employment center. Does anyone else want to point out other differences? There's a little bit less area around Woodland Park that's included in this boundary, but there is still, kind of the core of Woodland Park is still in there.
I think you just answered one of my questions. So the blue dot, the blue square out there in the east is Schriever?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I would suggest is we haven't gotten a lot of clarity on, so when we talk about being in or out of this boundary, how do we handle situations like this where, clearly Schriever itself is in the boundary, but I don't think anyone is going to be proposing a project in Schriever for the long-range transportation plan. Obviously, what we're concerned about is some of these roads extending out to Schriever. So we might want to have language that addresses that, whether it's a flagpole type situation or whatever.
94 would be the example.
Exactly.
I have a question.
Sure.
And reading over the notes, it occurs to me that El Paso County supports the urbanizing, and the city of Colorado Springs supports the urbanized. Because I'm looking at how their members voted on the different boards. So I was wondering if there was anybody representative of the county that wanted to explain why they're supporting urbanizing in Colorado Springs and wanted to explain why they're supporting urbanized and what the difference would mean to them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Excellent question.
The difference is the two sides are pretty adamant on what their positions are, so there's got to be a reason.
Yes,
I
Councilwoman Gable?
guess I'm more trying to understand, it sounds like, yeah, there are disparate views, but the PPACG and the CAC has found some sort of compromise to accommodate for both of those views. And I guess I'm very grateful that you guys have really, really taken the time, taken this back several times now to find compromise. And so I guess I'm less interested in again, trying to find out why the two areas want their way, because you found compromise. And I really support that, and I want to move forward. So I'm going to make a motion to move forward with the CAC and PPACG staff recommendations.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Second. A motion, a second. Let's go back to discussion. Yeah, I think we have a question on the table, too, so.
Just help maybe with clarification moving forward on different issues. These words and positions come up before, if they understood what everybody was, and then, you know, what the implications are financially or transportation-wise.
So we did have a lot of that discussion at the TAC and the CAC meeting, and our two dissenting votes on the TAC were, City of Colorado Springs representatives, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I mean, we do have members of those committees in our audience, so I'm happy to try to reflect what their comments were, or they're welcome to come up themselves and speak.
I think the amount of discussion we've had on this kind of shows that, really honestly, everybody's really not sure what's going on here and why it's so important. Maybe I'm speaking for myself.
Well, I could certainly do that, but I'd like to hear the, if Kathleen, if you would care to elucidate the position. The City of Colorado Springs.
Okay, just as Nicole's on the phone.
Okay.
Kathleen Krager, City of Colorado Springs Division Manager of Traffic Engineering, and both the City of Colorado Springs Traffic Engineering and Mountain Metro Transit have taken a position that we're recognizing the urbanized area for the infill, but we agree with the compromise brought forward by PPACG staff. We think that that's a good compromise. But the reason we're looking at the urbanized area instead of area to be urbanized is that the real definition of infill is that it gives you the opportunity to develop land or redevelop land at a higher density that already has some or all of its infrastructure available to it. It has a roadway system that may need some upgrading, but it doesn't need building from the ground up. It has utilities, that type of thing. What you find with as cities grow, those infill projects can become expensive. And they become expensive for a number of reasons. Sometimes utilities are old and have to be redone, and there's an expense. Can be an incredible expense when it comes to working with the community, because an established neighborhood might have gotten used to an open green field next to them, even though it's been zoned for, say, commercial use for the last 50 years. There can be a big fight over such things. And then you have the problem with construction, because you're dealing in a city instead of out in the open, and so everything has to be done with, say, lane closures and all those things that make construction much more difficult. So most cities have found that they need to encourage infill because they don't want their core area to sort of collapse into decay while they're serving a bigger and broader area that is more costly to serve for police, for fire, and for infrastructure. So the idea is to try to give credit for people that are willing to take on the extra expense of doing infill. By being one of just many selections on TIP, this is a chance to give cities their sort of good boy for doing infill work rather than greenfield, which is typically much cheaper to do. So our goal is to try to encourage that infill with at least one of the selections on the TIP process. No problem.
So would example of that, like in the area that I live, kind of the Skyway area, like Ivy Wild, and then they had to buy the properties or the ownerships of the businesses along Nevada, and
That's correct. Ivy Wild's a perfect example. South Nevada is currently going through an urban renewal area. Quite expensive to purchase the properties, update some old utilities, improve an existing street, but really worth it because we're going to be taking out 1950s motels that are really no longer in use as motels, but for other uses that I don't want to think about, and revitalizing an area. That would be much cheaper to go out to a green field at the edge of Colorado Springs and build a grocery store and some retail and a restaurant and some apartments. It would be far cheaper to do that, but not near as beneficial for the city as a whole. Any other questions? I'm going to turn it over to my fellow engineer now.
Well, Kate, Kathleen,
Mm-hmm.
on question, one of the discussion is connecting infrastructure with areas that are, outdoor ways.
Mm-hmm.
What would the city's position be on supporting, for example, Highway 64, which is not in the city, connecting it to areas that are outland?
I really don't have a problem with that. We realize there's problems on Highway 94 connecting to Schriever and to other sort of urbanized areas that fall outside of the city. And that is, when you're talking about Schriever, say, increasing in size, that's really infill as well. Schriever exists today. State Highway 94 exists. It just might need to be improved. And that's why I'm really comfortable with the compromise, because it does give some credit for development that occurs outside of the urbanized area and in the urbanizing.
Yeah, I think along that line, both 94 and 24, because 24 connects Falcon, which is another area on this map which is urbanized.
Yeah. And in the same way, 24 West might not technically be in that corridor all the way up there, but it certainly serves urbanized areas. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you want to talk on the other side? Jennifer?
Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. A couple of items just to make sure that you're aware of it. The first recommendation, the recommendation by the TAC, the county felt we already made a compromise, and that was originally agreed to by city staff. And then as this continued to go along, and they have the right to do that, we understand that, they then changed again and wanted a different compromise. We felt from the county standpoint that we already did. One of the things that we felt was really important, and I think it's somewhat captured here, but not all the way captured here, is that our major employment centers, especially those outside the urbanized area of the city, I mean that initial boundary, just the urbanized boundary, which includes several jurisdictions, we felt it was really important to include Schriever. We felt it was really important to include Fort Carson. I don't think that's on there either. And we really felt part of the issue that we had with the current urbanized areas based upon the 2010 census. And as you know, we've grown significantly since then. So that was some of our major concerns. But what I would say generally is that from a county standpoint, if you look at our adopted master plans in the county, all of the areas include infill. So as we're looking at the definition of infill in our adopted master plans in the county, all of those locations include some sort of infill. So you'll see infill in Falcon. You'll see infill out towards eastern El Paso County. There is some sort of infill. So I really didn't think it was fair. In talking with our executive director of development services, all of our areas, if you're looking at the definition of infill and what it means to the county, it's not just in the urbanized area, although we do recognize that the need for improvements there. There are urbanized areas that are redeveloping and have applications currently in process within El Paso County for areas in Glen Eagle. Some of that area is not covered by this map. So that's why we were recommending the urbanizing area. I'd also say that that area is just not recognizing what's really truly happening. So we are seeing areas that are being annexed that are outside of those boundaries today, that are currently in annexation applications in the county and the city, and also need improvements for those roads. So I think we've made our recommendation, and the board will make its decision. What I would urge you, if you do approve the plan that's recommended by the CAC and PPACG staff, is to make sure that there's language in there that accommodates those highways. Those are the ones I was very concerned about, is making sure that we have definitely urbanizing areas along 24. That's why we did the US 24 PEL. We want to make sure that we have the ability to make improvements to those roads that serve Fort Carson and Schriever, and those are not only state highways. We have the Defense Access Road in the county that's very important to make sure that we provide access to Schriever Air Force Base. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I was just going to turn, you can talk. I'm just going to turn everything off except for the blue, so you can see the holes a little bit better. If I can see the screen myself. Okay, maybe that helps.
Chair, if I might.
Yes.
Good morning, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the city. Just to add a point is that, there are a number of objectives in the plan, the 2040 plan. Infill development is just one of them. So it's not, if you're not infill, you're not necessarily going to get scored well or be a project that's in the plan and in the tip. It is just one consideration. So there are other objectives that we're trying to meet with the transportation plan, and those can be addressed through those other objectives. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gabler, you have a
Well, I
question?
would like Jennifer to provide kind of feedback on the compromise, because there was a suggestion that it's not really a compromise, and I truly think it is a compromise. And I think it's really important. What Craig just said is this is only one of the criteria. Some of the criteria are maybe a little bit more supportive or leaning toward a more urbanized area, some a non-urbanized area. I mean, they're not all for everything, and that's why we try to find compromise in a regional entity like this. So I don't think we should be trying to pick it apart too much, and that compromise really, really is important in this area. So I would love Jennifer to kind of respond.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that real quick. So I did want to piggyback on Craig's comment, and then this was a good segue, that the next piece after this, so right now we're trying to set our last target. And so the next piece is the scoring criteria, and that's where things are going to get really interesting. But right now, Ken and I have been sitting down trying to figure out, well, what are the scoring criteria going to be? It's going to come to the committees. Right now, we're looking at about 10 different scoring criteria. Infill is one of those, and then the CAC and the board together get to assign weighting to each of those. So if you want infill to be the most important thing or the least important thing, it can be 90%, it can be 0.1%. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go. Sure.
Jennifer?
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County. I just, to address the comment, I just, again, if you remember my comments from last meeting, what Craig mentioned is exactly what I said at the end as well. I said this is one of 13, I think it's 13, right? Which we think is too many anyway, but it's one of 13 criteria. So whatever the board decides, it's a board decision. So what I'm just letting you know is that there's infill in the county in adopted master plans that doesn't recognize this, and if you look at the map, there are areas in the county that are urban, that are infill, and it's not recognized by this map. That doesn't mean it's a good thing, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. What I want you to be able to know is that that's the case. And what I want to make sure, again, and I left you with this at the end, is please make sure that we include those important roads related to US 24, Highway 94, and those other connecting roads to our employment centers. Because from my perspective, that's, if you choose the CAC and the PPACG staff's direction, that's probably the most important thing that's not included in this map. So, and in regards to the compromise, we work with city staff all the time. They're great. They have a different view. What I was just making sure that you're aware of is that we felt, as a result of the first meeting at TAC, we had a compromise, and people are talking about compromises here. We felt from the county standpoint we had a compromise, came back, and we had another discussion at TAC, and the vote went where it went. We disagreed with city staff, but we always will work with them. It doesn't mean that we're not friends anymore, but we have two different views, and there's a reason for that, right? So I don't have any problem if you adopt it. I just would urge you again to make sure that we include some of those connections so that we take care of our major employment centers. Fort Carson is its second largest employer, and we know that Schriever is growing significantly. And from a county standpoint, I want to make sure that we're in a position to support those efforts.
Yes, Mayor.
What's the downside for the city to include these other highways that Jennifer was talking about? Can somebody explain that to me? I don't see a downside there unless you're down.
Well, actually, I thought that the roads connections were part of the compromise. So, yeah, but you can follow that up in a minute. But go ahead.
Sure. Good morning. Brian Vituli with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit and Chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. And I just wanted to say that, Jennifer, thank you for making sure that we're still friends and we agree. So, thank you for that.
Fist bump.
As Jennifer said, there was a lot of compromise at the TAC level, not only with the county or from the county, but also from city staff. And when it came down to it, after the board addressed this item last month, city staff opposed reaffirming the already recommended recommendation that said, let's go with the 2040 urbanizing area. And that was based on primarily, as a reminder, the board-approved objective for infill states that we should increase transportation investments in infill areas with a focus on existing infrastructure. So we no longer felt that the TAC recommendation was aligned or supported with that already approved board objective. So that's why we opposed the recommendation in October. So we felt that we wanted to focus already on the infill areas, and the city has an infill amendment to the comprehensive plan that states that infill is broadly defined as the development, redevelopment, major renovation, and or adaptive reuse of properties or buildings in the older and largely developed areas of the city. So we just kind of rethought our strategy on that and wanted to, while we were pushing for a more aggressive boundary, such as the 2010 urbanized area, city staff is quite okay with the PPACG and CAC recommendation of using the 2015 employment and population area. We feel that that's a good compromise to a compromise that's already been stated. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer, if you could answer the one question on the connecting roads, because I thought it was included.
Sure. So that's why I made an effort to point that out earlier, that I think it's an area that still needs more clarification. In staff's mind, anyway, that's certainly an option that's on the table. I feel like as this map is presented, the fact, for example, that, Schriever is out there, it's a blue square, but it's sort of a gray area, or in this case a yellow area, about the connection. And so I feel it would be very appropriate for the board to weigh in one way or another so we have clarity, because when staff is trying to score projects, we don't want it to be up in the air whether we should give points to something along 94. We want it to be clear from this recommendation.
Okay, I'm not sure if you answered my question. Are the connecting roads part of this, what's in the current recommendation?
I think that needs to be decided today.
Oh, so it's not. Okay.
I wouldn't say it's not, but I think it's,
Be clarified, yes or no?
it needs to be clarified by the board.
Question, is that just the road, or is it development along the road? Because those are two different things.
We were thinking just the road.
Okay.
It would be a flagpole type situation, kind of like how Woodland Park is considered an urban cluster, and so you basically see a tiny little thing going up 24 to reach Woodland Park, but not everything surrounding it.
Commissioner Littleton, and then I'll come back.
Thank you. And while it's not infill at this point in time, but, there's certainly are discussions underway about developing right on the north side of Highway 94 out by Schriever Air Force Base as they continue to get more and more staff out there. There will be 1,000 houses out there if we were looking at this for 2045. As we move forward with this. So it's not infill, but it's certainly, we want to make sure that those roads are going to be, taken care of, that they can be accessed easily by Schriever and for future development out that way as well. Does this also include infill over and annexation of, I think it's the Park Vista area, where the gem streets are, Diamond and Sapphire and, does anybody know?
Don't know.
Where that is.
Not familiar with that area.
It's kind of off of Austin Bluffs and Barnes, right around there.
The
Gem
enclave.
Streets, the Enclave.
The enclave. Looking at the map, yes, it is.
I don't know, there's little pockets.
You want me to zoom in?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Where about over this area?
Austin Bluffs and Barnes.
Yeah, go to the left a little bit.
Help me.
Area right there.
Okay, one little no, go north. Yeah, zero in on that enclave.
This one?
I don't see where this one is. No.
No. The cursor? This?
Yeah, the triangle one.
All right.
Austin Bluffs, yeah.
Anything?
The Austin Bluffs and Barnes.
Oh, looks like it's not.
What does that say?
Zero in a little bit more, because I can't, what's the, oh,
Powers and Stetson Hills.
what is the southern border road there?
Austin Bluffs.
What does that say?
What is that one? Can't read it.
You can't read it?
Can't read it.
I can't read it. Stetson Hills, okay. So that's,
Further back to the west,
yeah, so I think the area you're talking about, Peggy, is included.
That's Austin Bluffs right there.
That's Austin Bluffs right there, yeah.
Excuse me?
And that's all included. Compliment her singing.
See the map.
Okay.
Sorry, where do you want me to go?
If you could go south of Fountain View,
Sure.
because I'm just trying to figure out how much, it's
What's
very
in?
difficult to tell when it's large.
Do you want me to zoom in more?
Is that, I can't see the name of the street, I can't read it.
Which one?
Well, like the
Any
one
of
that
them?
kind of curves up
This?
there. Nope.
Is your mic on?
Left. I want the bottom edge of it. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out how far south it's come on Highway 85, just to make sure it's covering our info area. Almost there. To the left, please, by Highway 85 there, yeah. Okay. Is the road that curves, what's the name of the road that curves? Like
This?
Santa Fe Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Jeez.
Okay. Mr. Moore?
Jim Moore, Chair of the CAC, at-large member of the CAC. Just wanted to hit on a couple of things because in your reports from both the TAC and the CAC, and I monitored the TAC meeting for exactly this purpose, I think that Bethany has done an excellent job of summarizing the discussions. If you've not looked at those, I think you get a pretty good idea. And Jennifer's comments are exactly on point. I felt that the TAC arrived at its position based upon a discussion that took full consideration of the county's position. I'd like to reinforce what Brian had to say, and that is that where we settled, where the members of the CAC settled, was basically going back to the plan objective. And the plan objective designated existing infrastructure really spoke to incorporating the most current data that we could get about population centers, and that's that 2015 information that the staff brought forward. The second point is to keep in mind that we're really talking about a decision here that has a 4 to 5 year life. This process repeats. It's cyclical. And the fact that we are trying to deal with a plan that has a projection of 2040 on it may be something to keep in mind, because you can come back in 3 or 4 years and change the whole thing one more time because of what will happen between now and then. Finally, the situation with the military. The TAC wanted to incorporate specific language about military-related projects into this decision. The CAC felt that the military projects, as they come forward, have a different tone to them. They include national security considerations and needs, and therefore probably need to be addressed as a separate element in scoring. And so our motion does not include the military as such, but we have a separate motion that asks the board to approve considering military-related projects, which would include 94, would include Fort Carson, could even include the academy. All of those things can be considered and weighted and scored separately.
Separately from infill, you mean?
I'm sorry?
Separately from infill, you mean?
Separately from infill, because they have, it's just, there's a different weight
Right.
to the projects that are related to that, I think.
Okay.
Questions?
Questions? Nope. Mayor Levy, I think you are.
Well, yeah, I mean, based on what they're saying, we can change the plan A. B, it's just one of a number of things we have to decide on. I don't see any downside. I'd like to have somebody tell me what the downside would be. Include the 24 order, Carson. I just can't imagine not including that access. But I'd like to hear somebody who the other side is.
There hasn't been any indication that there is a downside to doing that in the committee meetings or from staff, so I have yet to hear that.
Good, so let's include it.
Is that a motion? Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have a motion, so is there a motion to amend?
I can amend Jill's motion if she's.
I'll have to agree. Just make an amendment and someone can second it, and it will be voted on.
Make that amendment that we include those other two arteries relative to Shrever and Fort Carson.
I'd second it.
94 and 24? Or you said Fort Carson, though?
Fort Carson is in 24.
That's not 24. What?
24 and 94 are the two that I mean, the ones we talked about.
I'd second that.
That's not Fort Carson.
I understand.
I'm just ready to make it more general there, to say connecting infrastructure, generally speaking, rather than two specific corridors only.
Sounds good.
So,
You make the amended motion.
well, no, amendment's already been made and seconded.
Well, but we'll.
We can adjust it. You want to adjust that and just say connecting?
Okay.
That was an odd.
Agree on the outcome.
So restate the motion then one more time with
For
the amendment, correct?
Well, to insert the language and provide connecting infrastructure after the word employment boundary in recommendation number 2. Should be located within the 2015 population employment boundary. The motion is to the second recommendation. This is the CAC PPACG staff recommendation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The motion then would be, which appears in the handout, recommendation recommendation number 2, CAC and PPACG staff recommendation to at least 95% of the projects in the 2045 long-range transportation plan fiscally constrained project should be located within the 2015 population employment boundary or provide connecting infrastructure, as shown in map 1, attachment 1.
Attachment 1, let's make sure the map.
That's it right there.
I know, can we put that map up here so we can make sure?
That's the blue.
That's it, right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
it.
The amendment adds the words, or provide connecting infrastructure.
Can you say to what? Because when we start scoring projects, people are going to abuse that.
No.
That loose language.
Connecting infrastructure to the other areas. To other infill areas.
Major employment centers or something, or military installations.
To major employment centers? To what?
You said it.
What?
Well, I was.
What did he say?
Clarify what Mayor Levy was saying.
So should do the military installations or?
Or do you want it to employment centers?
Employment centers.
Okay.
Isn't that one of the same?
Well, it's
I think that
Major?
it's more broad, but that would include military centers, yeah. Last I checked, they are employed. Yeah. Does that work?
I'll agree with that.
Okay, we have a motion to amend and a second. Any further discussion on that item?
Let me just say, I am really appreciative of the work that the CAC, TAC staff done. Jennifer, you've been awesome. I mean,
Thank you.
carrying this through, laboring through all this language and arguments back and forth. I mean, I am really proud of what you guys have done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your discussion, too.
Okay, we have on the floor a motion to amend, and any last,
Are we voting on just to?
just the amendment.
Motion to amend.
Motion to amend. Any discussion on the motion to amend?
I want to say Commissioner Vanderwerf just came in. This is something I'm very supportive of this motion to amend.
Thank you.
Yes.
Nicole Nicoletta is too, but she is having difficulty calling back in, so, for some reason.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We now have, with the amended motion on the floor, any more discussion on that item? Going. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And I just want to add the comments that this has been going on since August and has gone back and forth several times, and really, I think we have a good, thorough process and a lot of really good work. We are smoking through. We now go to the reports. I was thinking, yeah. Let's go ahead and get started with the reports, and we'll step through. Military installation update. Carlos?
Good morning, John Doucette, 21st Space Wing, Peterson Air Force Base. Just a few items for our update this morning. Last month, Colonel Dorminey visited with the Fountain City Council and provided an update on the PFAS, PFOA. And my understanding is that we are targeting updates approximately once per quarter to that forum. So, yes, ma'am, of course. Had an exceptional community partnership initiative meeting last week. Had a great turnout for the event and lots of great dialogue, as always. Lots of great projects that are in the works, and we look forward to growing that venue in the future. Last item for update, we are working a update to our lease package with the Colorado Springs Airport. That package is currently down in San Antonio for a real property and legal office review. Excuse me. During that review, apparently the current appraisal is currently not valid. That was discovered during that review. So we're working with the Army Corps of Engineers to update that appraisal and targeting that to be complete by the end of December. So once we have the lease package reconciled, it's probably going to take approximately 3 to 6 months for higher level Air Force approval, and we'll work to expedite that process as much as possible. If any questions, that completes my update.
Seeing none.
Morning, Colonel Dave Kincaid from the Air Force Academy. Got a few things going on. We got approval for funding in fiscal year 18 to redo the tri-intersection bridge, which is the one that's the first bridge that comes into Southgate, so that'll have some impacts, working with the railroad to make sure that we're not stopping any traffic there. Probably around $16 million worth of work on that. Are in the early phases of relooking how we're going to handle the Kettle Creek Dry Dam, which would have impacts to I-25. That's the one if you're coming off of exit 150 at Briargate and you look to the right, it's all the big pile of rocks right there. So there are concerns that's classified by the state as a high-risk structure. We're looking at how we can work with county and state government to hopefully mitigate any of that risk. But that's not a short-term thing. It's more of a long-term thing. Millions and millions of dollars probably to do that. Working with the local governments on Warrior Games. So we're having Warrior Games at the Academy in 2018. About 250 athletes and up to 500 family members will be participating in the games at USAFA, and I know that the team met with some of the local officials, including the mayor, yesterday. Also, Commissioner Littleton talking about some options for some command and control stuff that we'll probably beta test this summer and possibly look into for expanded use at a future date if it meets whatever requirements we end up coming up with. And the last piece, the General Severity wanted me to bring it up for probably a future discussion is traffic flow off of the Academy after football games. So a typical football game, looking somewhere between 18 and 24,000 people. A service rivalry game, upwards of 40,000 people. Had more than a couple complaints after this last game about traffic flow off the Academy, which is really limited. We're limited to what we can do on the Academy. I think our proximity to the exits on I-25 or on-ramps on I-25 limit us a little bit because there's only so much I think that CSP and CDOT can do as far as that corridor is concerned, as far as traffic management once they're off the Academy, but possibly looking to collaborate with the city and county to see if we can maybe get some traffic management, get all the lights going one direction to reduce some of those backups. So that's probably a future topic of discussion. Thank you.
And just real quick on that, have you coordinated, I guess we turned off the mic, have you coordinated with anyone in CDOT on that?
Not yet.
Okay. So we do have some people, we have an I-25 corridor manager, and I just don't know if that's in the region, if that's in the city of Colorado Springs TOC area or outside of it or not. But I can give you maybe a name and number for you to coordinate with to see if we could help you in addition to the city. So I know during one of the concerts we used drones to watch the traffic to see how it flowed and maybe where, we can help with that traffic flow. That was last year. That was an experimental.
Were they watching the traffic or the game?
Traffic.
And a question for the Colonel, is Prince Harry coming again to the Warrior game?
We don't know yet.
Oh, you don't know.
We hear the Rock might be coming, but
Just say yes.
Oh, the Rock.
Definitely coming.
With regard to drones, I don't know, does CDOT have its own contract for drone services or what have you? I mean, if you used them in the past, how was that done?
It's a good question. We have them in different groups. So we've used them in our geohazards group to look at rockfall areas and things like that. And then our TSM&O group, Transportation Systems Management and Operations, is starting to look at drones from that perspective. So rather than having stagnant cameras, they would use drones at certain times to watch traffic. So it's an experimental thing. I think we are going through some kind of contracting process to hire people to do that, but I just don't know.
Yeah, Karen, I just want to, in case you didn't know already, the county just very recently completed and placed under contract 2 local companies for drone services. The county's not interested in buying UASs because that's a capital investment, but we actually have a contract that can deliver services, and that contract is available for any public agency in our local community to use.
For drones?
For drones. And so if you were interested in a future conversation about maybe using that county services contract for that purpose. The companies are required to be compliant with FAA regulations. That's part of the terms and conditions of the contract. So, we were very careful to make sure that we ensure FAA compliance with that. So that is part of it, but it's available for your use if you should desire to use it. And just let me know if you have an interest. And anybody can use that. So I heard a wow over here, so if you were to have an interest in the road, our chief engineer, and other people in town that can help you if you have it.
So when you say use the contract, would we be paying for the services, or would
Yes,
that
you would need
contract?
to pay for the services, but the pricing is in the contract, so you would know in advance what that would mean, and then you can decide whether to use it or not. That'll be your call. So where we are starting to use that contract is in very simple unmanned aircraft things, just taking overhead pictures of construction sites and riverbeds and basic stuff like that, which helps us do land management on behalf of the county. That's where we're beginning. We haven't used very much yet, but we think it'll be used more. So that's available to you, Karen, or whoever, if you would have an interest.
Okay, I'll coordinate. So we have our local traffic group, but then we have our headquarters TSM&O, and so I'll try to figure out.
Totally up to you.
Yep.
It's offered.
No, I appreciate that.
Could be of value. Go for it.
So Nate Harris, Schriever Air Force Base. 2 items coming up here over the next month. So our next community planning event, this one's going to be hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. It's going to be on the 12th of December, so invites should be going out shortly on that. Again, this is a forum for private and local government interests to come together to talk about development really along 94 and outside Schriever to help bring services out there.
When is that?
12th December.
December 12th.
Yes, ma'am.
So has CDOT been invited, or?
I don't think the actual invites have gone out. It's
Okay.
just kind of the initial.
Okay, good.
warning. Yes.
I was going to say, on Tuesday mornings, that is a BOCC meeting, so they won't be any county representatives.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am. Okay. But again, as you all talked a little bit here, I think the major limiting factor is 94 and the utility corridor. So that really seems to be the main issue stopping from the privatized developer standpoint. That same week, we're also going to have a base emergency management exercise looking at chemical, biological, radiological, or explosive event on the base. So it should be no impact to anybody outside the base, but again, we'll be going through that week. And then finally, Commissioner Littleton, you asked at the last meeting about the plowing initiative for the roads. That is still going through legal review on both sides, so a little bit of progress, but that's where it sits right
Sorry that can't move along quicker on both sides.
now. Right. But pending any questions, that's all I have.
Okay.
Yeah, Hal Allgaier, Director of Public Works at Carson, sitting in for Rod Chisholm this morning. I just wanted to, on the front side of this, point out that the Army really enjoyed the football game on Saturday. Yeah. Doesn't happen that often. Hasn't happened in the past that often. So, yeah. The only other thing I wanted to mention this morning, I wanted to give you an update on the Defense Access Road effort with the Charter Oak Ranch Road from off of I-25 there, across from Fountain, Fort Carson, up to our Gate 19. I want to thank the county for sending us the letter in support of the project. General George endorsed that. We sent that up to the Army leadership. I'm going to give Jennifer the schedule over the next several months of when the Army looks at putting new projects into their 5-year program. And I think there may be an opportunity for the community to knowing that schedule can help facilitate some additional conversations about the importance of that project so that the Army could consider putting it higher on the list when it goes to Congress. So we're still actively working it, and I appreciate again that endorsement from the county. Yes.
Would you let also, the commissioners know about that timeline as well? And I think it would be really important too for the chamber to know for Rich Birchfield, so that we can do that community advocacy like we did in the past with, RAC.
Sure, we will. Thanks.
If you do, just let me know.
I can show you what we have from the county. I think we're covered on the, because it talks about the broader community support in trying to make this project happen. So I think we're good.
Jennifer?
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County County Engineer. I just want to add to that, and Fort Carson's been a great partner, and appreciate everything that they've done to work with us. That we have completed all of the roadway plans. They're at 90%. We are in the process of property acquisition for that project. We have an updated cost estimate, and we are actively working with Fort Carson. So that's why I asked him for the schedule, so that we can make sure that we put our federal lobbyist on point with that, and make sure that we can make some well-timed phone calls to make sure that we are able to advocate for that at the federal level. And I just want to add that with our completing the design plans for the project, we have an updated cost estimate, and even with the DAR funds, we still have a delta that we're trying to identify additional funds for. So we are continuing to work on that and make sure that that is one of our highest priorities to get that project underway.
I think, just what Jennifer states is why it's important for us to know as we go on trips to DC, we have the opportunity sometime to go. They turned it off. So, yeah. So as we go on trips to DC, we have that opportunity to go into the Pentagon sometimes and talk to them and actually lobby for this. So keeping all of us up to date, I think, is really, really important, so we can all collaboratively work together on that to continue pushing for you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was getting interference from someplace. Executive Director Search Update.
Okay, well, as you, Norm State Taylor County Commission, I chair the search committee. It's a 10-member committee, and get a little bit of waterfront here. We expected to have a full interview today, as you recall, but in our last process, we had narrowed the search from 4 down to, 4 finalists, but 3 of those dropped out. It was not the preference of the search committee to offer this board one candidate, an up or down vote. So the search committee has gone back to work. We met yesterday, and our process through the alert process went back to look at the full list of 21 qualified candidates provided to us by the search firm we've hired, Mercer Group. Of those 21, there are 11, perhaps 9 remaining qualified candidates that we have been voted to reconsider those in work session next week, Monday, to narrow that 11 down to a new list of finalists for interviews. Those interviews will occur on Wednesday, November 29th. It'll be most of the day. That will be conducted in executive session. Board members, I presume, would be invited to attend, but not the public. Being an executive session, we'll conduct in-depth interviews, probably 45 minutes apiece. We'll be flying in probably up to 6 or more candidates to Colorado Springs, bringing them here. We'll meet them in person on the 29th of November. So their next December meeting, December 13th, would be the date that we would provide to this board our recommended list. We presume 3 finalists on December 13th for final selection by this full board for appointment. 29th of November still gives us the 14 days legal notice between the announcement of finalists and the final selection and offer of a position on the 13th of December. It's been laborious, and appreciate everybody's patience with the process. I know that CDOT is concerned, Federal Highway is concerned, that we don't yet have an executive director, but again, I really want to commend Rick. Rick has done a yeoman's job of managing 2 major organizations, so publicly, Rick, let me thank you for all that you've done to carry us along here. This will be most of the day, so we'll have nearly an all-day schedule. We'll be beginning at 8:30 a.m. Yes, 8:30 a.m. And we'll begin most of the day. We have yet to coordinate with our search firm, Mercer Group, as to what specific time slots and which people will be interviewed on the 29th will be determined next Monday by our local search committee, narrowing it from 11 down to some smaller group of, again, target probably around 6 to 8. So, yes, Dan.
Yeah, I just like to say thanks to Commissioner Steen, to the members of the Selection Committee Board, and to the senior staff of PPACG, because this has been a long process, a difficult process. But my sense is, and I think this is exactly where we need to be, we're committed to taking the time that's necessary to make the right choice, as opposed to trying to rush through a process and just select, any qualified candidate. We need to pick the right candidate because that's so important for the PPACG. So my thanks to that team. And I know it's not been easy for all of you. So.
And let me just say, this is not just Pikes Peak staff. We also have community organizations. Dirk Draper from the EDC, Dave Munger from Kono. Other organizations are also, because we recognize that PPACG has an impact on the entire region, not just local governments. So a lot of time and energy, time and time again, phone calls. It's a very laborious process. We believe this is very important. But we're going to do this right. And I think you'll be very, very pleased. It's not going to be easy in December to make a final selection. You're going to be pleased. Let me just say that. Any questions? Any other input from the general board? If I could ask, Chair, from guidance to the committee?
Any comments, opinions? Yes. Thank you, Commissioner.
Just as an aside, I've been serving as the liaison and the voting member on that for the county. And
El Paso County.
Yes, for El Paso County.
One of the three counties.
There's lots of counties here.
Or the county, the El Paso County.
From the El Paso County.
The El Paso County, yes. So, and vice chair of the committee. I did talk to my colleague, Stan Vanderwerth, and I am going to let him finish out the meeting on Monday and then the following Wednesday on the 29th, simply because my parents, my father passed away a couple weeks ago. My mom is not doing well, and so I think it just deserves a lot of attention that I can't give right at this moment. So Stan has agreed to finish out for me on my behalf, and if I can make it, I will be there just as Andy is to listen.
Ex officio.
Yeah, so as an ex officio member. But I wanted to thank Stan. Thank you for filling in for me for the rest. He's been great.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate Commissioner Littleton's willingness to do that. I'm ready to serve. I think, for me, I would like to know that the selection committee has no issues with that. I don't think you do, but it's important to hear that. And then be happy to continue to serve in that, the one vote from El Paso County and finish out the process with the representative from our county.
I should say that the discussions have been substantive. I mean, we've not always agreed, which is a good thing. I mean, if everybody agreed, both of us would be unnecessary, right? As the old saying goes. So very substantive, very much appreciated, and I think we're in a really good place. So again, December 13th, we vote, and we also plan on December 12th for a social meeting. We're going to do that repeat. So in the afternoon of December 12th, we look forward to inviting the full board back to meet the candidate and a guest for each candidate in a social event. We think probably around 4 p.m. on December 12th. Please put that in your calendars to meet them in a more social, relaxed atmosphere. The following day, then, at the regular board meeting, we would conduct a full interview with the following vote for appointment.
Well, we have a council meeting that day. It's our only one in December, so it's likely to go very long. So the city will likely.
So you'd like to go earlier, you'd like to go later. We'll compromise at 4 o'clock.
How did we decide on that particular day?
Well,
it's just-
our regular
it's
board
just-
meeting's the 13th, so
Yeah.
the day before, when they have flown in, they're in town with a candidate plus a spouse, I presume. We can use a spouse term. And we'll have a chance to talk to them informally, to understand character, and I think they'll understand that the interview really formally begins the next day, but probably more substantive might even be the previous day. It's a social event. Just what kind of person are we thinking about working with? So.
Are you concerned at all that you're trying to do this all in a holiday month, that maybe we should just try to slow it down to January?
No, I think we need to press forward.
Rush.
No,
Not rushed.
it's not rushed. This is a measured pace, but the middle of December is not. It's not in the middle of the holiday season. I think we can accommodate that.
A social event on the 12th of December, 4 p.m. here in this room, and then on the 13th of December at 9 a.m. regular board meeting for the selection. That will be a public meeting, by the way, with could be press and so on. We have talked at length about that process, whether we move that to executive session. Public law does not allow that. This is a public organization, and selection of its leadership is a public process. So there's been some concern from the candidates of moving into a public process as a candidate, because these are top-tier people. These are top-door people. And once you advertise in the public space that you're considering another position, that affects their current. These are not unemployed people. These are not people looking for a paycheck. These are skilled, highly qualified people who we have to compete to hire. So we're very mindful of that. And, again, I personally feel very comfortable with the process for that.
We compromise at 3:30? Does your meeting start at 1?
1, yeah, we start at 1, and we run until whenever we're done.
I mean, we're planning for 2 hours, 4 to 6 p.m. Chair, I was your call.
I have to allow 30 to 45 minutes for traffic to get back downtown. And I'd like to get to the council meeting more than 5 minutes ahead.
When does your council meeting start?
6.
6. Yeah, it's up to you when you want to start. I think 3:30 is, you know.
You could afford to
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You know what's happening with the Denver search? Right?
They selected.
Applying for Denver as well?
Yeah, they selected.
Doug Rex,
Doug
who was
Rex,
the
yeah.
acting director for nearly a year, was selected through a competitive process as the Dr. Cos director in Denver Regional Council. So, number of the finalists for Denver Region are also in our list of finalists, in the group of 21 qualified, including the 11 that we have considered yesterday. Were finalists in Denver. We are considering they're in that group of final 11 that we're looking at for interviews. So, yeah.
I think you'll find, as Commissioner Steen said, you'll be very pleased to see the people that are on this list. They're good people, and we will be very well served by just about any one of them. So,
Now, if you are by chance contacted or by any of these folks as a voting member, you can discuss, about your region, Pikes Peak, but I wouldn't disclose where they might stand in the ranking and that sort of thing. I mean, certainly be more forthcoming about who we are as a community, what issues are important to us. If you're contacted by the local press, we'd ask that you refer those to the Pikes Peak staff, please.
yeah, there is a fair amount of press interest in this. When we postponed there, I was fielding a lot of questions from the press, pretty sharp and pointed. So I expect that will be pretty good coverage. But next month's meeting will be, just as I said last month, targeting this month. Next month's meeting will be very critical, be very important, and that will be the business of that month. Will be to select the executive director. Most everything else will be just like we originally set up this time to be on consent or deferred.
Let me ask maybe one more point. Even though the selection will be made in public process, negotiation for compensation may be done in executive session because that's not a public matter. Private conversation of it. Selection is public, compensation is not. That will be conducted in executive session.
So were you telling me that the candidates have some range that they know they're going to fall in? But they don't know exactly?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Correct, yes. There is a range that will come a low to high. 165 is a starting.
130 to 196 is the full range.
Is the full range, right. Plus benefits, that would be subject to negotiation. So, okay, that's all I have, Chair.
Okay. Southwest Chief Commission Rail update.
Okay, so I think since I last reported on this issue, the committee has met several times. We meet as the full committee that is addressing both the issue of the Southwest Chief, which I think you all know runs east to west and
currently hits Walsenburg and goes south, and they want it to go north to Pueblo. And then there's a separate group working on the Front Range connection for the potential of high-speed rail all along the Front Range, possibly from Pueblo all the way to Fort Collins. I serve on that subcommittee of the Front Range Committee. The full committee is trying to come to some decision by December 1, which is the demand from the bill passed in the legislature last year, where we would come to them and tell them how we think we should fund this type of rail system, whether it would be a PPRTA sort of thing, a statewide tax, what have you. We realize that's probably not going to happen by December 1, so the chair and vice chair did meet with the TLRC I guess it was last week, and they asked for more time. They also asked for some funding to hire somebody to do research for us so that we can reach out to communities, engage with the municipalities and the counties to see what their level of support is, how we might best find funding to find a sustainable solution for transportation along I-25 throughout the whole Front Range, because we realize we can't continue to add lanes to I-25 and support our commerce and people traveling along the Front Range. So we are moving forward, but I can't say that we've actually accomplished very much at this point. We're just kind of trying to best understand what the support is and what the feeling is throughout all of our areas along the Front Range. Are there any questions? I know that's confusing.
Questions, comments?
I do, we have meetings once a month. I said that we meet at CDOT. I'm happy to send that information out if anybody ever wants to join me. You're welcome to come. They're open meetings. Craig Blewett from Mountain Metro came with me to the last meeting. He was very helpful. Thank you, Craig. And city staff, county staff, always welcome to join.
Is the scope of the commission only the Southwest Chief, or does it include all rail solutions, including Hyperloop and others proposed?
It could potentially include Hyperloop. I think we, as a committee, have decided that Hyperloop may be a long-term, long-range solution. We haven't seen any indication that Hyperloop is viable. We have to think more immediate and how we might support I-25 now and into the near future. I don't see, none of us believe that Hyperloop is something that's going to happen in the next, 10, 20 years.
But it
So
will
no.
also include other rail
I'm sorry.
options, not
It
just-
includes, well, we have narrowed it to high-speed rail. If it is going to compete with the highway or the freeway, it needs to be as fast or accommodate passengers in an equal amount of time, or otherwise people aren't going to use it. Well, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a transportation solution that nobody uses. So we have to find a solution that actually works. So Hyperloop would be great, but Hyperloop, we don't see that as being viable. So it would have to be high-speed rail. We have kind of decided on that route. But it also includes the Chief, which is a separate issue. More the Pueblo, I'm trying to remember the towns down there, Raton, those areas are more concerned and working on that particular issue.
So the commission is more than just the Southwest Chief?
Yeah, it's the Southwest
It's
Chief
it's a full
and
rail.
the Front Range, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I stepped out for a minute. You guys also discussing the last one, the 1.5 mile issue?
No, that's not part of the charge from the legislation. We are to come forward to the legislators, letting them know what we think is a viable, sustainable transportation solution for rail all throughout the Front Range, from Pueblo to Fort Collins. But now, I should add, Wyoming's got word of our work, and we have heard that they would like to join our conversations. So interstate, possibly. I don't know if, Karen, you know anything more about this, but okay. What a concept. We might work together.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Executive Director's report.
Just one highlight from the memo that's in the packet. One of our other transportation planners, Kevin Reyes, who you've seen make presentations here, notified us that he wanted to take a timeout from 40-hour-a-week office work, and he had found a job as a ski instructor at Snowmass. So rather than lose him completely, I came up with the idea, floated it with his boss, Ken Prather, and Ken and Kevin talked about the possibility of part-time telecommuting, and they reached agreement, so we're We're experimenting at about 20 hours a week with Kevin telecommuting from wherever he's going to live in Snowmass and here to keep working in our transportation department part-time. So that's my one highlight, and I'll yield the floor.
You made a comment about transplant on one. Decision been made there?
No.
Can we make a big deal of that, that we're, helping people in harm,
Transportation advisory.
Yeah, STAC met last,
I'm sorry.
STAC?
Well, I didn't say stack, but go ahead.
Oh, all right.
We don't have stack on?
We don't. I thought you had me in. Real quickly, October 27th, last STAC meeting. Most of the issues focused on budget. The STAC did recommend passage of the proposed CDOT budget. A very large spreadsheet, very fine print. We recommended approval of that to the full Transportation Commission. Some discussion about the Colorado Bridge Enterprise. This is the Colorado Central 70 corridor. Some protest about the amount of money that's going in for Bridge Enterprise. 50% of 23 years of bridge money, 50% of it going into one project. Well, after clarification, this one project constitutes 60% of the total bridge in the state.
For bridge deck.
For bridge deck, yeah. So 50% is actually probably a little low, because we've got 60% of the total bridge deck is on one project. So, got to calm a little bit of fire there. A lot of discussion about possible state transportation ballot measures. We expect a number of bills to come up in the legislature. The key action for us is that every one of those bills has contained language on something called the Tier 1 list. Developing that Tier 1 list is what specific projects or even corridors might include the language of proposed legislature is up to us, CDOT, and keep conversation with the MPOs and TPR. So that discussion, what goes into that Tier 1 list, specific projects, is our task.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So what's our strategy to make sure we have a seat at the table during all of these discussions on these transportation bills that are going through the legislature? I guarantee you, Dr. Cogg's going to be there. They're going to have their advocates fighting hard for legislation that I'm guessing we're not going to be agreeing with. So what are we going to do? How are we going to make sure that as the region's second largest community, that we're driving policy when it comes to transportation spending in the state at the state capitol? How are we going to do that?
I think that we all have a responsibility to take that back to our local representatives or the legislature and do that fight. And I think every one of us, every one of the communities has a connection to do that. Is that enough?
Nope, it's not. I can tell you, as somebody that sat in the state legislature for 6 years, was the House Republican leader, no, it's not.
Do we need to look at hiring a lobbyist for one issue, or one bill? Because we can't afford to hire a lobbyist to have that all the time. But you can't, it's my understanding, you can hire a lobbyist for one bill, correct?
I think we need to look at having a presence there that has boots on the ground, that's tracking the issues, tracking them for PPACG, not, just for our member governments and sort of doing it on the side. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying right now.
And what do we need to do to get that done?
We need to figure out how to hire somebody. I think it's eminently doable. But I don't think that any one of us in the room have the time. You know what? This discussion's happening now.
Right.
We're missing an opportunity right now. It's the JBC is meeting probably as we speak here right now. They've already started. Bill titles have already been pulled. Legislation is already being drafted right now. You come to the table after the bill's been introduced, guess what? You're too late. You're too late to the dance.
What's PPACG done in the past in this regard?
Well, okay, well, we do have a part of a lobbyist that works state and federal issues, and then each of our, well, not each of us, but several of the cities have a lobbyist that works state legislative issues. If we need to increase our involvement, Mr. Storm, I think you have.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but, you know, the chamber has lobbyists full-time. I mean, year-round, they're not the only, they lobby for other organizations as well, and maybe COG could tie into that lobbyist that's already there and established. I don't think there's a way to work that out.
I think we already do pay for a part of that lobbyist.
Well, if you do, then you have to put in that lobbyist.
No.
Oh, for the federal.
It's only federal.
Only federal.
The Impact Coalition is only federal.
Does not have a state lobbyist.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
I think they do for certain issues, and they decide to try something, but they're not, I don't think they know.
I think they do.
Mark, how about,
Just Storm,
I
if you
think the
could.
first thing is to look at the budget, see how much money we can afford in it, and see what kind of lobbyists we can hire for that kind of money.
I guarantee you, as Dr. Cox sitting around the table right now, they're not saying, let's have our member governments send their lobbyists to the state capitol. I'll bet you they're paying, they probably have more than one. Well, I have no idea. No, I'm not talking about how many member governments they have. I'm telling you, they have a presence at the Capitol that's there on behalf of Dr. Cox.
If I could, I'd say, whatever they're doing, whatever we end up thinking that we need to do, there does need to be a very directive approach to that. Now, if we hire somebody or we try to use somebody that we have now, part of that has got to be bringing along the other constituents in our community, so that person would help with coordination, to have the occasional chamber be part of this, or to have the occasional public agency from one place or another be part of that, because I think the more we can demonstrate about a partnership and a broad regional consensus on certain things, that's a key part of that. But to Commissioner Waller's point, however we do it, somehow, some way, we've got to have somebody or some entity helping in that coordination. Otherwise, we won't necessarily look congealed and forceful. So
That's a little bit of it, but here's the point. It's not enough to be reactive. And that's, I believe,
I agree with that.
The strategy, at least in my 1 year's experience, that's what we did last year when it came to legislation. We reviewed it and we reacted. We weren't proactive. We weren't developing policy. We weren't writing amendments. We weren't engaging legislators to create policy. We were reacting to stuff that was already created. We have a far greater responsibility to this community than that. We need to be visionary. We need to take the bull by the horns. We are the 40th largest market in America. We have a responsibility to drive policy, not react and to try to change the policy that Denver's trying to drive. That's all I'm saying. We can do that. We can do it, I think, very cheaply. But we have to understand that's what we need to do. If we paid $15,000 for a lobbyist, one transportation project, just one, has paid for it 100 times over. That's a pitch I'm making to this organization. I'd like to put it on the agenda for maybe next month to talk about how we can approach this. But I'm sorry, and I know perhaps we disagree on this a little bit, but I don't think it's enough to rely on member governments and to rely on ourselves to do it. We're not there every day of the legislative session.
Do we direct staff to figure out if there's a way in the budget to pay for it and get some potentials on what it might cost?
Yeah, I think we can, you just put it on the agenda for December. I absolutely agree with doing that.
Well, I mean, Rachel Beck used to handle this when she worked here. I guess Jessica does that now, but she's not here. I mean, I think she could lead that kind of conversation of trying to understand where we should be. I mean, we did just approve the 10,000 for the federal lobbyist. I mean, we may want to reconsider that and decide where we should be putting our funding.
Because it's more effective to go there.
I mean, we have a limited budget, and we need to decide where we can get the most bang for the buck, because you're exactly right. We are losing millions and being short-sighted, and what do they call that? Penny-wise, pound foolish. So, I mean, I completely agree. I think Jessica sort of needs to drive that from the staff side. I mean, I would love to know what other communities are doing. She could look into that and present to us, where are we falling short? I don't know what that is. But it seemed like Rachel was very engaged when she had that role here, and I haven't heard a lot about what we're planning this session.
When she was there, she did exactly what Mark was saying.
But she's not a lobbyist.
It was reactive. It wasn't.
It's better than nothing.
Well, yeah,
More last year than probably
yeah, I
And
Right.
it's still very reactive.
You're exactly right.
It was a start.
It was a step in the right direction.
A step in the right direction and a start, and I believe what you are proposing is the next step, and we need to consider.
Okay, we'll put this on the agenda.
Thank you.
For next month, and the action item, take a look at it, and
Keep in mind, we have approved a draft budget for 2018, so any step would require an amendment to that draft budget.
so let's bring it back next month.
By board vote.
What are, and if we did something like that, Rick, what are funds that could pay for that? Would it have to come out of membership dues? It would not come out of a grant, right?
I can work with Casey and come up with a list of items that you could decide to cut to substitute for this.
Potential cost, just some potential costs,
Sure.
It does have to come out of dues. It's not, we are not allowed to charge any of our grants for a lobbyist activity.
I guess that's why I'd like to see some comparisons of how other COGs pay for these sorts of things. If Denver really has that kind of money, where are they getting it?
Well, there's a little more.
58
Well, I
member
don't
governments.
disagree, but I mean, I think that's part of the research I'd like to see.
Okay, we'll bring it back next month for a decision.
And then one final thing from staff, one budget item was, that there was a recommendation by the staff to reprogram transit funds. There are two major sources of legislative funding for transit. That's Senate Bill 228 and then last year's Senate Bill 267. Both of those have very short time frames. The cash, what we call it, kind of the odd thing was that the slide was yellow, so they called it the gold mount. Money comes in for a very short period of time. Staff recommended the Transportation Commission to take that money and spread it out so that we can have sustainment operations rather than simply purchase it. Looks like Greg's going to have a comment.
Again, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager, City of Colorado Springs. We do have some concerns on some of the changes that are being proposed. One of those changes is to take some of the faster statewide money and put that into operations statewide. That's been a... Sure. Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager. One of our concerns with what's being proposed at the state level is to take some of the faster funds that are earmarked for statewide activities. We benefit from that by replacing our van pool vans that connect people and residents of El Paso County with jobs outside the county, and also van pools available to Schriever and Peterson and Fort Carson. That money could go away for us. It would be replaced with the Senate Bill 267 funds. Is that right? The issue there is those 267 funds haven't been figured out yet. So they're taking away money that we benefit from with the promise that it will be backfilled for something that's not assured at this point. So we would like to see some assurance before the funding is given away to operations. Once you give money to operations, it's forever gone.
Okay.
So we will work with the state at that level, and I'd like to brief you, if I could, along with Rocky Scott, in terms of what our concerns might be.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Transportation Advisory Committee.
Good morning, Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs and Chair of the TAC. The report is in your packet, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Community Advisory Committee. What he said. Any questions or comments? Regional Advisory Council. Oh, he's going to have something to say.
I'll be short. Joe Urban, Area Agency on Aging. Dave Bessler could not be here today. I think the report's in your packet. The one thing I would want to highlight is an update to many of you followed our funding challenges over the course of the last few months. We did receive a partial federal allocation on Monday, so we got some piecemeal carryover from last year, as well as some funding that encompasses the continuing resolution period from October through December 8th. That will get us through in some areas till the end of the year. In some areas, it actually carries us through to the end of the year. As many of you know, those federal programs are pretty siloed. So if you'd like the full explanation of that, and I've got an extra week, I would be happy to give that to you. RAMP got funded probably through the end of the year. RAMP is Rural Area Meal Program. That's home-delivered meals to rural areas.
There was going to be no funding past the middle of October, and we were going to have to cut to our eastern El Paso County. We were going to have to try to prioritize and see who got food. I'm really glad that got.
And we have faced, in a nutshell, we have faced two primary challenges this year. Number one is the fact that we're getting allocations in 2-month chunks. But probably the bigger problem is the State Controller's Office has traditionally funded that period between the state fiscal year and the federal fiscal year with state funds and then just replace them with federal funds when they get here. The Controller is not willing to do that anymore, to accept that responsibility. So we have, in the future, we're going to have to figure out how to feed people from July to October. Other questions?
Too many.
Park as well, yes. Any other questions? Thanks.
CDOT. Karen, do you have
Want to take a break first?
Does that imply a long?
Well, I have Mark and Dave, and I'm just saying that it's been 40 or an hour and 40 minutes.
Hour and 40.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you want to take a 5-minute break or if you just want to.
Yeah, let's take 10. Let's take 10.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It's my message. There's an opportunity to illustrate the point I wanted to make. Yeah, it illustrated my point. So I'm sorry. I just, 15 grand this year. It's really we don't have, well, we don't have time for that.
So we could have lunch right afterwards at the conference. But I just thought we wanted
Are you leaving Jill Gabler?
Yeah. My daughter's in town. I'm going to go spend the day with her. Denied. She's like, hey there, how you doing? I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Norm. Mr. Commissioner.
Nice to see you. How
are you?
Good, good. I'm hearing little rumors about maybe throwing your hat in the ring in a Teller County race. Yeah? Give it some serious thought? You give it some serious thought. Yeah, okay. You talked about Campbell's for your breakfast. I mentioned that.
I was in Washington for 6 weeks.
Next year. Yeah.
This fall.
Okay, that's a long stay.
Well, I got 3 friends who are now undersecretaries. I got 4 more who want to be. So I tell you, after the election, I got a call the day after the election last year. The guy at the White House saying, "We want you back on the team."
Huh.
You know, like you. My dad was there for 40 years. I was in and out of Washington. He says, "I need people. We didn't expect to win. We need good people." I'll get the resumes. We got 7 out of 7 are going to get these jobs, undersecretaries. So I was out there with them, Senate hearings, the whole 9 yards, White House. And they said, "We'd like to hire you." I said, "Colorado and Washington." They said, "No, we can only do Washington."
So they called 2 weeks ago and says, okay, we got a job for you, SES job, non-career.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
that's the usual, GS-15 or SES.
Yeah.
When is the basic starting point? It's non-career, so you don't do the whole package. I said, maybe. I said, what about a board or commission? I said, yeah. Oh, wait. Put me on a board or commission.
A board, okay.
Anyway.
Order. Okay, yeah.
They did find me an SES job. It's in Boulder. I said, no, I'm not going to go to Boulder. Give it to somebody else who wants it. I'm in Teller County for a reason. And I really got to know Bob a little bit this summer. And I've been talking with Mark and maybe succeed Mark. I'm a former deputy base commander, ran the base. You and I have, you have a greater military experience.
But plus it was guard, not active duty. And there was a difference. But
so I got to know Bob. I have a master's in business management, finance.
Yeah.
Managed to put that $1 million budget. So I got thinking, well, Mark's due up in 3 years from now. Bob, 2 years. And this is really confidential.
Well, Bob's up 18. That's right, a year from now.
So I went to visit Bob last week for 2 hours. Back there on the 16th when you guys are meeting. I'm going to spend a half day with Bob. And very confidential. Leaning toward not running.
We need good people. We need people with head on their shoulders who understand finance, or understand it. Now, it's not policy. See, the treasurer and Bob made that clear. That's commissioners. That's right. So basically, complying with state law and all the rules of public finance.
I'll give you a good 8 years. I did talk to Dave Paul. I had talked to Mark that year. I was going to quietly discuss it with you.
Mark is out.
I had a nice chat yesterday with Dave.
Okay.
Ernest Stone. I have to resign from the board once I announce. Teller County, according to our bylaws. So Mark said, if you make a decision, go ahead and announce now. Dave said, wait till next year.
Which after January, because campaign finance reporting starts immediately once you announce. And some people are already in. It's a small.
For the treasurer race?
Yeah. I mean, you still have to start reporting your donations and form a committee. Well, you still have to form a committee. I mean, I formed the committee, had my own money in it, but it's private money getting into public money. And as you know, now that's public money.
So how many people on your committee?
I had a treasurer and me. Because, it wasn't a big contentious race in the treasurer. I wouldn't expect to either. But it's like forming an LLC. It's corporate money, personal money. You don't blend them.
So would you recommend waiting until January? 6 weeks away?
Yeah. I mean, it's easier. I mean, it's not a highly contended race. Keep in mind, when is our county caucus? End of February, I think. So once you declare, you've got to build your voter base. We don't even know who those. So as you know, at the precinct level represents for the neighborhoods to be a county caucus representative. 100 people from across Teller County will be elected from 13 districts. Those people meet at the county caucus and build the ballot. They will vote for who the candidates are, and the top vote getter becomes top of the ballot. And if that person gets more than 70%, then because you have to have 30% to appear on the ballot. If you get less than 30%, you don't appear unless you petition on it. So if you're the only candidate, obviously you'll get all the votes, and you'll be the only person on the ballot, unless someone else petitions on it.
That's why I want to get your name in.
Yeah.
Get your name out there right now instead of Bob telling.
Yeah.
Make a decision.
Yeah. You need to be clear. You can't be hesitant. But if you're after this, you need to be very definitive, solid. And if your decision is to make a hard start in January, that's still okay because it's a hard start. You're not toeing the water and then back out, toeing the water. If you're in, you're in.
When you were running for commissioner first time out, what was your MO? Did you announce the year prior to the election?
I announced in December,
Okay.
Just because I wanted to be, so I got all the mechanics in place in December. And then in January, all the mechanics were in place, the structure was spread, I had a committee, I had a funding chair, I had Philly filed Secretary of State. Then 1 January, I knew exactly where I was going. So.
That sounds like a good role.
Yeah, I mean, if you are set on this, I would make it. I would go in. Go in.
My wife, she despises here.
Well, the treasurer's not policy. It's not policy. I believe in the law. I mean, and we're done. That's the end of the conversation. You know,
Right. Here's the law.
Yeah.
By the way, I did follow through on a suggestion you made to me a couple years ago.
Oh, well, what was that?
Substitute teaching.
Oh, did you?
So I'm now
Good
a
for you.
certified substitute teacher.
Good for you. Okay. How's that going?
I just got the certification from CE.
Okay.
I got to go to Willow Park High and then go through that. I went to Billy Mitchell High down here.
Okay. Okay.
Well, you know my dog right there.
Yeah. So I said, you know what? I enjoy teaching. I've been an instructor in the Air Force.
Yeah.
You mentioned me briefly one time. I said, okay.
You can make an impact. You can change. You change a student's life. You change it forever.
That's what I do at the academy. I'm there a day a week teaching.
Yeah. Just realize classroom control.
Well, I didn't, he did.
Why do they hate me?
Well, with the new swimming pool, I was a swimmer for 10 years. But maybe I could coach.
What time is it?
I think I'll talk to you more about this.
So, yeah, still on for lunch. We're just going to finish this up.
Yeah.
Maybe another 10, 15 minutes.
I am. I had problems with another place. Hey, take a look at PPACG. It works. Now, of course, hopefully.
Yep.
45 minutes, the keyboard's supposed to work. Started, but not started.
You see my boss again.
Yeah.
That's what you get for taking a break.
I know, that's why. Stay here. Change this and this. Okay.
Thank you.
That's right. Okay.
Good morning, Mark Andrew with CDOT. I'm going to just hit on a couple things, and I'm going to turn it over to Karen. One of the things I want to talk about is we had a very productive meeting about the ITS project that we'll be advertising next year. It's a fiber project that will connect Manitou Springs to Woodland Park and complete that gap in our fiber system. And the process is very interesting to locals because we open it up for unsolicited proposals to participate and partner in that project with either in-kind or funding or additional elements to the project if they want to bring those. So that process will be going on in the next couple months, and we've been working with our locals on that, the county, Manitou Springs, Woodland Park, Teller County. So that's coming out of our ITS group again, and we'll go ahead and solicit those proposals January 1st, and once we collect a project, a joint partnership project, we'll put that out next spring. CDOT's contributing $2 million, and our project is going to include a fiber that will be a dark fiber exclusive to CDOT, but we'll have two other conduits in that trench too. One conduit will be electrical, and there'll be a third one for future opportunity. But that's just what we're building. So there may be additional elements that are added onto that with that unsolicited proposal process. So good news on the fiber. It's part of our overall statewide connection that we want to improve connection with fiber. It's a high priority project in that regard. So. Some of you may have heard about the Powers Extension article that came up in the Gazette, and there was some news coverage on it too. I'd like to come back to the board in the future, probably January, and update the board on where we are in that process. It's pretty extensive. So the good news, I think we're working forward with the city and the developer to come up with a project. The question is there going to be enough funding to build it? So we'll come back to you with more information on that, timing and schedule. That's the Powers extension, right. It's the 1/4 mile, or actually it's a 3/4 mile extension that will build the interchange at I-25 and end at Voyager Parkway. Right. So.
Mark, quick question. There were 2 phases. One of them is funded, the next one is not.
Well, I would say the first phase is not completely funded in according to what we think the cost will be. We think it's a $75 million project. So far, the district is able to raise $37 million. So there's a gap there, and we'll have to figure out how to fund that. It has not been a CDOT responsibility to fund that gap. So there's other discussions about future PPRTA funds or future development funds that may add to that project. So it's half funded is the way we see it. So.
And that project only goes halfway to Powers.
Correct. There's another 4 miles to be extended from Voyager down to 83 to complete the Powers extension. Don't get us wrong. We are in favor of the project. It's a part of our system that we need to connect in the future, and we want to be a partner with that and see that succeed. But we're questioning the dollar amounts on it. So.
No, it's, okay, the fiber project to Woodland Park.
Yes.
What's the projected completion date on that?
It's going to be this spring. We'll probably complete it by summer. They want to advertise it. I don't have an advertisement date. They want to collect the proposals from all the locals by January and then go back and amend the project and then advertise it this spring. But it should be finished by summer.
The western terminal is a Walmart.
That's the western.
Walmart is the western terminal.
I just would like to express my appreciation to CDOT for that project. We kind of had an initial discussion about that a couple months back, and then we had kind of a cooperative meeting with several different municipalities here just in the last week, I guess it was.
Right.
Or actually, it was Tuesday this week, sorry. Tuesday this morning, and I think we've got a great sense of momentum, and again, I appreciate what CDOT is doing. And for you all, I have a large number of constituents. I mean, Green Mountain Falls is not a big place, but I have a lot of people in Green Mountain Falls that have been expressing to me frustration about not having broadband, still living on old technology for their internet services and so forth. So this becomes an opportunity to address that on behalf of those citizens. So in addition to just a thing that is valuable for CDOT mission, CDOT needs, this becomes an opportunity for a trench, for other people to drop fiber, for service providers to service the needs of people in communities along that path. And I appreciate the fact that CDOT is doing this, and I'm interested in making sure that we continue to pay attention to that part of this. And I'm willing to offer my assistance and help as required to kind of make sure that we ensure that that happens for the communities along that path. So thanks very much.
You bet. And then lastly, I wanted to brief you on the county hearings that we've got coming up. CDOT's reaching out to the counties to provide information on CDOT, who to contact. It's a broad overview of introducing our maintenance staff, our traffic unit, and then talk about bus staying a little bit and bus staying outreach, as well as funding, that we've got overall funding and what the outlook looks like. So we just did Fremont County, and we're scheduled for Park County and El Paso County. I don't think we're scheduled yet, but we're planning to schedule.
Teller is next.
And Teller's November 14th at 11 o'clock, 11:30. But we have not planned El Paso County or Park County, so look for those dates coming up.
How many you bring in the group?
There's typically about 4 or 5 of us, and it's really just our maintenance, traffic, and engineering staff.
Where's that, Norm? Is it
It'll be at the Cripple Creek, at the Centennial Building in Cripple Creek. 11:30 on the 14th.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
So I've made some notes just so I don't forget anything, and I'll try to be brief. But we do have our CDOT Veterans Day event at Peterson Air Force Base, so I appreciate them allowing us to have that event there, and then we'll tour the museum area and things like that. So every year we have like 68 veterans in our 400 people in Region 2, so we try to make a big deal of it. And then Friday is a state holiday for Veterans Day, so just in case you're trying to reach our staff on Friday, they're usually not available, so the I-25 steering committee meeting is closed, or is canceled for this Friday. And so we all know with the election, the I-25, the GAP, has dedicated local funding, which is a really good thing. That makes it better for our infra grant. To be a better contender on that, but also we've made a project delivery selection confirmation of what's called CMGC, but it's where we select the contractor that's going to build it, and we work with them on packages to start construction. So our goal is to get at least one phase of construction started next fall, and with a contractor on board. And what that looks like, I'm not real sure yet, but we're dedicating John Hall, who is a resident engineer in our Region 2 North program, but he came from Region 1. So we're taking all his other responsibilities away, and he'll become our project director for that. He'll work for Carrie DiGiacomo, who is a PE3 in Region 1. So it's really a combined project, but because of trying to get that project out by next fall, maybe it's widening all the bridges, for example. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the first project, and then you can deliver other projects in succession. So maybe all the widening won't happen until spring 2019. But that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure we have a dedicated resource. And he's he's from the Army, and he is very good at getting things done. So, what are you going to say?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Karen, can you talk just a little bit about and I can't remember exactly what it's called, but basically the scoring criteria for how we score the need for these different projects for those federal grants. And I know that this project basically scored off the scale compared to the other Colorado projects.
I don't know much about the scoring of the projects. Is that a federal process?
No, we'll let.
I haven't heard about this, so
I'm not
sure.
asking it the question correctly.
Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. We've been working with CDOT very closely, and there's a lot of people and moving parts. But essentially, the infra grant was submitted on November 1st, actually, and part of that is the BCA ratio. And the BCA ratio for this project came out as a 7. And as I understand it from the CDOT legislative liaison, all the other Colorado applications, they haven't seen one of them, were around 1. So this project has a great BCA ratio to support that application. Yeah, benefit cost now. Sorry, that's the engineer in me. So I think together with the local funding and the minimized of the federal, and I think that we have for this project have a great application that's going to be very competitive.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's always the problem. People all over the state say, we really need this done, and we're like, yeah, I know it's a need for you, but there's so many other needs. And so the benefit cost analysis is a huge thing. I know Lamar Reliever Route went after this grant when it was called Fast Lane, and their benefit cost ratio is pretty low because they just don't have the traffic volume out there. So that is a real good indicator of possibility of winning the infra grant. There's 900 applications for the infra grant, so it's at a pretty tough competitive environment nationwide. So Shailen Batt is leaving CDOT. In case you haven't heard, he's our executive director. He's going to American ITS organization in Washington, D.C. It's Intelligent Transportation Systems. He'll be president and CEO of that organization. He'll leave at the end of December. The governor should announce in mid-November who will be the executive director for the remainder of his term. Mike Lewis is acting executive director or, sits in for Shailen. So we're hoping it will be him, but the governor will announce it for sure in mid-November. And November 14th, which is a week from yesterday, the governor will have a town hall down in Pueblo at 6 p.m. Again, he goes around with his cabinet and does like an hour and a half, an hour speaking with him and his cabinet, and then half-hour questions. So at some point, I would guess he'll come around here, but that's just next Tuesday in Pueblo at 6 p.m. at the Union Depot. So we're going to have an I-25 public meeting December 7th. It'll be at the county facility on Mark Dabbling. Is that right? And so you should get more information about that. But December 5th will be the Tuesday. It'll be up in Douglas County. And then the Thursday we'll have the public meeting on the I-25, the Gap, as well as it's really the whole corridor from Monument to C-470. We'll be looking at issues and big picture plans. But after that public meeting, we'll be stopping or pausing work on the PEL and focusing on getting a project out for the Gap. CDOT Region 2 headquarters will open our new headquarters building in Pueblo in March 2018. It's on schedule. I know that's not a big impact here. We'll have still our CDOT local headquarters. We do have busting Outrider, so it's smaller buses. It provides a different kind of service, but that will be starting January 1st from Lamar to Pueblo. And then we'll be having other Outrider services starting around the state in summer 2018. Mark Imhoff, who is DTR Director, Division of Transit and Rail at CDOT, he will be retiring at the end of the calendar year. They're working on filling his position. But that's where we're going to talk about the county meetings too, is these smaller services. And eventually that Pueblo or Lamar to Pueblo is expected to extend up to Colorado Springs. So there'll be a connection from Pueblo to Colorado Springs, and then you have the bigger busting buses that go to Denver. But we're trying to come up with a transit system that connects everyone and work with private partners, also with Greyhound and other operating agencies, where we may provide the bus and then we contract out the operating services. And then I don't know if anyone travels south. This is a bigger deal in Pueblo, but our I-25 rest area southbound is closed for, we said closed for rehab. But so it's my time before me, and it's not an excuse. It was built in 2005. The system wasn't working well. We did something to try to fix it, but there was too much trash and other things dumped into it, so it never composted the way it was supposed to. So we spent $150,000 to clean out the system and try to get a bid on what it would take to really fix it. And really we had to get an engineering firm on board, and they said it'll be about $2.5 million to build septic fields to fix it. So we're now looking for $2.5 million. And the problem is we don't really want to open it up and spend another $150,000 to clean it again in order to do the fix. But we're trying to make that decision. So I'm working with my executive management to figure it out. And there's a policy level decision that's going to the transportation commissioners on statewide rest areas that CDOT, if we're keeping them open, to what level, what's the funding dedication, how do we inspect them to make sure that if they are there, which ones do we keep open at what level? And so they're looking at a tiered approach, a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 3 rest area. But that hasn't gotten to the Transportation Commission yet. So we're kind of in this pause and wait. So that's the southbound rest area between Springs and Pueblo. I think we're dedicated to keep it open, but it's just it's a funding need. And the northbound rest area will shut down for 3 days next week, but that's just an immediate repair to one of the pipes. It's not. So I think we're afraid that people are going to say, oh, sure, you're going to say 3 days, and it'll be longer. No, we're working on a short-term repair. But I just want to keep you updated on that. And I don't have a lot of information on this, and Commissioner Scott isn't here, but we I think Jan Martin is running out her term as HPTE board director. So we have a Transportation Commission board, and then we have a HPTE, High Performance Transportation Enterprise Board. Marky Scott's on both. They serve different capacity. The HPTE can charge for things, and CDOT can't. And so they're a little bit more innovative. Like they might charge for fiber use, like that could be something they could do in the future, things along those lines. But I just wanted to let you know that that vacancy is coming up for this area. I don't have a lot of details.
Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Karen, I think it was at the last PPACG meeting, might have been a PPRTA meeting. You talked about, from the costing point of view for the I-25 widening, and I know that that process isn't done, but you had a number of about 350 is kind of what your belief is. And when I do my kind of numbers between Infragrant and CDOT and local, I think we're actually there. But I'm interested in actually what progress has been made with regard to costing of the project. What is going on with that? Is there a process that's happening in detail? And, can you give us some update on that?
I can't at this time, but I would say, so John Hall will come on full-time in December, and we just selected the project delivery method, so that's the CMGC. Normally, CMGC is good at getting projects out early and getting phasing done, and it has other benefits, but it's usually more costly. So I think that's a good question and a good discussion. We think $350 million will get us a project. Now, is it the ideal project? I'm not sure, and John hasn't gotten to the details of the cost estimating. So, it's kind of like, do you want a minimal project or do you want something better? If we want something better, we have to come up with additional funding, but $350 million will get us the gap. We're in some form or capacity. But there's other financial elements that are out there that we're still examining. So I would say probably by January, February, we'll have a better idea. And part of that is when you select a contractor to work with CMGC, they help you get better cost estimates too. And they help you look at phasing and what you can do with phasing and how that might work and how you can get the project built. So.
Okay, thanks. And appreciate, that was actually going to be a follow-on question from a timing point of view, but I think you answered that. January, February, perhaps is the next,
I think we can,
at a point in time in which we can have a deeper discussion about that, I guess.
I would say February is probably something where we can come back with something a little bit more decisive. We should have the contractor selected by that point. John will be on board. He's very good at looking at those things and coming up with a plan. So.
Thank you.
We should have something by then.
Commissioner?
Karen, does the project going to be design build finance? Do we know yet?
So it's CMGC.
Okay, which is?
Okay. Construction management, general contractor. So what happens is you have a designer on board, and then you work with this contractor, and you pay them to work with you on how to best phase it, how to best construct it, what methods to use. What is your goal? Is it minimal impact on the traveling public? Is it the phasing? And for us, like the phasing is a big deal. It's to get a project out by next fall and then look at what projects would be in the next spring or whatever. But you negotiate with that contractor on what the cost would be so it doesn't go through a traditional low bid effort. But we're still in the process of doing a tolling analysis. So, for example.
No decisions made yet on managed lanes or not, then. Is that accurate?
I would say the public meeting, we're probably looking at an alternative that would have managed lanes. But I don't know in terms of decision, what that's at. But the tolling study is happening right now.
Okay, does Region 1 own it, or is that, how are we going to split, because we're splitting regions and MPOs, and what's that look like?
In terms of?
Region 1 going to own the whole project? Or are we going
Yes, Region 1 is managing it. So yes, they will manage the whole project and they will be in coordination. So I will put a tentative thing to update the board in February on where we're at on the tolling study, on the financial, the phasing of the project and things like that.
planning to make a transfer then from Region 2 to Region 1 for the 2 miles that we own? Or is that part of the, let me answer that question as well next time.
So they're just in charge of getting the construction project out to build. So
Okay.
they're in charge of leading the project, but there's no transfer of, when the project is completed, the maintenance would remain in Region 2.
I guess I'm wondering, once it's underway, does Pikes Peak Council have an influence on the 2 miles? Or is it owned completely managed by Region 1 and it's a DRCOG conversation and we're a bystander?
Let me get with you offline, because there is no input required from PPACG or DRCOG. It's just all financial commitments, but and we will coordinate and have discussions with both agencies.
Okay.
But there's public meetings, as you see in Douglas County and El Paso County. So, I mean, they get input from both sides, and they consider that when they move the project forward. But there's no particular ownership that's needed from either side in the construction.
Okay.
I would just add, Commissioner Steen, staff also from both Douglas County and El Paso County at the table, along with CDOT. We are working with them closely, and I've been at every technical meeting, most of the steering committee meetings, and I think CDOT is probably going, in my opinion, above and beyond, making sure that they get input as far as, from all of the entities, including the local entities.
And that was my primary concern.
Okay.
We still haven't placed the table, even though it's primarily.
Well, I would say, as El Paso being the applicant for the infra grant, that we have a huge seat at the table.
Okay.
And they recognize that and have been working, I think, very well.
Yeah, and there's no percentage like we only consider El Paso County's comments 20% or 10%. You know what I mean? It's just what are we hearing from both sides and how do you accommodate it? But that's another advantage with John Hall. He lives in the Monument area. He's been in Region 2 for a few years now, but he used to work in Region 1. And so Region 1 is used to him, knows he can get this done, and so they're happy to work with him, but he is a Region 2 employee. But it's a Region 1 project we just need somebody to take ownership and lead it.
Actually, the Central 70 project is the gorilla in their cage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose, them, Dr. Cog, to lose sight of the GAP project, which we have a primary interest in.
Right.
I just want to make sure that we have proper focus on a project we really care about.
Yes.
And I would just add to her comment is that I'm really excited that John is taking, a leadership role in this project, because I do think that having been in both places, he does have a unique perspective of the importance of the improvements to the overall region.
Rick, did you have some?
Are the way stations under review, their locations staying or moving?
I think that's all part of the scope, but I don't think we've made progress on that yet. So I had a conversation with John yesterday, and again, I think at the public meetings that would be a comment, but as we work with the contractor, that would be, one of the things. Is that one of the first things you work on, or is that one of the later things that you work on in terms of working through those issues? To me, that's you got to start working on it now. Do they stay where they are? Do they move? How does that work? How do you accommodate it in the project? I think the port of entry is huge. So I think that's a detail that we need to delve into, but it hasn't been addressed yet.
Mr. Storm?
Congratulations to the county on getting the ballot issue passed on this subject, and to the city on theirs important ballot issues as well. But
And the RTA.
in the RTA. But since we got the money, the matching money, not a big amount, but an amount toward I-25, do we have any update on Douglas County on their participation?
Yes. So Douglas County has voted in their preliminary budget to put $10 million towards the GAP project. They haven't finalized their budget yet. I think that's going to be coming later this month, but I certainly anticipate that they're going to be putting $10 million towards it. A lot of folks have said, well, geez, 80% of the projects within their jurisdictional boundaries, why is El Paso County coming to the table with so much more? I think there are a couple of answers to that, or a couple of reasons why that is. One, we're much larger county with a much bigger budget. But, truly, this expansion, while it falls within their jurisdictional boundaries, benefits our county. I mean, it's tying our Colorado Springs to Denver, so that's why we're doing it. But yes, I think they're going to put $10 million in general fund to it. And I think actually Arapahoe County is looking at putting a Tabor issue on the ballot next year and perhaps using some dollars from that for this project as well.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So Dave, do you have anything on the ribbon cutting? Yeah.
Yeah, so you got
Well,
it in the
and
song,
I think
yeah.
the city has a link to the ribbon cutting. But yeah, we do have something on that. So Dave, do you want to speak to the ribbon cutting?
I just want to say, it's the first time I have been to that side of it.
We better have a gap ballot, that's all I'm saying.
It's beautiful. I mean, the walkway and the bridges and Colorado Springs, the landscaping, everything is looking really good. And I think when you come under the freeway now, where Colorado Springs is, I think they're still working on it. It looks like they took some of the rocks from the original bridge or something. And I just think that's a really cool historical piece, so it's just very nice. What's the big, now you're tearing up for some big pipe?
Oh.
On the east side of the highway?
Yeah.
I believe that's either a water or sewer line. I believe it's a water line.
Black. It's a black, big black, it's like a flexible.
I'm not sure what you're digging up here. I haven't driven by there lately.
If you're driving north on the freeway, right, you can get to where Motor City is. There's a huge
There's a large black pipe, about 18 inches in diameter, it looks like. I know it's not anything we're digging up. It's not anything the interchange reconstruction's digging up.
Better not be tearing up a road that we
They're
just
not.
did.
It's on this side of the river, the pipe is
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. Go ahead.
Dave Waugh, resident engineer, worked for Mark and Karen, and just emphasize my favorite pronoun is we, and we have a successful partnership that's been completed, as is represented at the ribbon cutting, with representation from the city of Colorado Springs. Karen emceed the event. Mike Lewis came down as the acting executive director. Federal Highways, Colorado Springs, and El Paso County, and it was quite a we effort as a partnership effort with $9.5 million of local funds that went into the $115 million. Some of that was landscaping. Add on to the end, we have operational completion, but you still do see some lane closures for that landscaping that's going in the ground. So with that operational completion, we're pretty much off the highway. There will be some touch-up work next spring when we get some warmer temperatures, some work we're going to do to improve the ride in that southbound direction. Karen, we didn't leave that off, but we were not going to force a bad hand this fall when you need temperatures and we weren't getting them anymore and have a large daytime impact. So there'll be a little bit of work southbound, not a big impact. We're going to do the work at night. Complete the landscaping, and we have some punch list item work to do. I know that the monuments were mentioned that are on the west side of I-25. We've got them located along 8th Street as well as the quadrant intersection at US 24. Those monuments you see are those large building blocks were from I believe the Colorado National Bank that was torn down in 1960-ish era. Little story there. Sometimes we get excited when we dig things up that look that ornate, that rock, and so we found out those were historical. That was the good news is it was a small H historical, Karen, not the capital H. We did check on that, and that was all fine and good, but they were incorporated back into the embankment work and into a little bit of the landscaping treatment there at the quadrant intersection. You'll see a little more work there in the upcoming weeks to reposition those a little bit. Maybe some signal pole work at 24 and 8th that was just not due to the project, but kind of in cooperation with the city. And our traffic signal, we're going to go ahead and do some caisson work there. And the city will go ahead and upgrade that signal system. It's more of a a high-end maintenance. One of the poles is bending a bit and doesn't look like it might weather a high wind event. But this has been a successful partnership project. You will see a very much reduced presence, but we do have a one-year warranty period that will probably start this spring as we wrap up the punch list items and repairs. And then another warranty period will be for the landscaping. There may be a separate project that we set up to take care of the landscaping maintenance. It has to go through quite an extensive period of establishment, go through a growing season, a one-year warranty, and then that becomes the responsibility of the city of Colorado Springs to maintain. But we're off the highway pretty much. We're excited about that.
Great.
Rocky Scott and the mayor both spoke as well at
Yeah.
the ribbon cutting, and they were all very appropriate in their comments.
Commissioner?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks again to CDOT for all of that, and also the naming of the bridge, which I thought was very appropriate for Jim Downing. And I was honored also to speak at that event, at both events actually, the naming of the bridge and the opening of the bridge. But I also wanted to mention that another initiative that I've put together is to honor another Navy veteran from Pearl Harbor who was on the USS Arizona during the Pearl Harbor attack. His name is Don Stratton. And when I heard about the naming of the I-25 Cimarron Bridge, I tried to see if we could get it named after both Jim Downing and Don Stratton, but the process had traveled too far and that was not possible. So I've been working with our state legislators, and I'm happy to say that they are going to do a proclamation on the 26th of January up at the House, State House, and that I think is Veterans Day or Armed Forces Day or something. It's a day that they will be Armed Forces Appreciation Day? Military Appreciation Day, so it'll be during that time. And they are going to declare the Fillmore Bridge to be the Don Stratton Bridge. And Don Stratton was on the Arizona during the Pearl Harbor attack. He was burned and 70% of his body, went through a one-year convalescence, and then demanded that the Navy re-enlist him, and he served honorably the final 2 years of World War II in the Pacific. And I just think it's awesome that our community supports these kinds of things, and so we'll have a second bridge naming ceremony next year. So he is not. He's 95. He's the spring chicken compared to Jim Downing, who's 104. Jim is 104 and is still has all of his faculties, is just a wonderful gentleman. He's in a wheelchair, however. Don Stratton also, sharp as a tack, probably, just as sharp as he's ever been. And he is still walking, so he's still actually self-mobile at 95. And lives in our community and has lived here, both of them have lived here a long time. So, thank you. You're welcome. 95 is kind of young nowadays, that's right.
I'll be happy to reach it. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Last item. In accordance with the Colorado Open Meetings Act, the board in open session is to determine whether it will hold an executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 Foxtrot in India to discuss a personnel matter regarding 2 employees who have consented to the closed executive session. The chair shall poll the board members, and upon consent of 2/3 of the members present, may hold a closed executive session. If consent to the executive session is not given, the item may be discussed in open session or withdrawn from consideration. Commissioner, I'll start with you. Aye and nay?
Aye.
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 Okay. We shall break to go into executive session, and we'll come back here in about 5 minutes. Nobody leave. Nobody leave. Except those of you who can't go. Yes.
What do we need, 8?
Well, it says two-thirds of those present.
2/3. Well, yeah, but
So, right.
it's still.
4 and is a third.
This will be quick.
Good.
I think that's, before we have the initial discussion.